Hello and welcome to the next video in our How to Paint Space Marine series. Today we'll be tackling a Black Templar Intercessor, and on this model we'll be working from a Black Prime using Vallejo Black. Just a few notes: we have utilized a helm from, I think it was from the Blade Guard Veterans kit, as it had this nice cross on the, the cheek of the helm, which felt more Templar-y, as well as adding in a few extra purity seals to the base model just to make it appear a little bit more holy or devout. So we've painted the entire model here as our starting color with a mix of black, Kantor Blue, and Incubi Darkness in a 2:1:1 ratio. And the first thing we're going to do over the top of that is to take some Thunderhawk Blue and add this into our base mix. We're then going to begin focusing on the largest area of the model, which is the armor trim. And we will be using this mix to paint in the chunky highlight here. The trick with this step is to keep your highlight about double the width of the thinnest that you can actually paint. And a couple of tricks here you can use to get better lines is to ensure your paint is thinned down or you're using a wet palette. Make sure you are bracing your hands against your desk or the surface that you're working on to stop them shaking, and to utilize the side of the brush where you can. As long as you take your time, you'll get there. The main thing is to take your time, and once you're done with the armor trim, that's going to be the lion's share of the model done. And here's how he looks now. And it is a somewhat subtle step that we've just completed at this stage, but it essentially will become more apparent after we do the next step, which is to just take some pure Thunderhawk Blue. And with this, you're just looking to paint over all the areas we've just covered, this time with lines that are about half the width of the previous one. So these are kind of the thinnest that you can do. And with that thinner edge highlight done, our armor trim is really beginning to take shape. The next stage of this is to take equal parts Thunderhawk Blue, Administratum Grey, and White Scar. And we're going to use this mix to add some selective highlights to the model where we think we should be drawing attention to, or where it would be highlighted from our imaginary light source, in this case from above. Next, we're going to take some Ulthuan Grey, which, if I'm being perfectly honest, is rubbish at covering, especially over darker colors. So you'll want to use some thin paint here, and don't stress if it looks a little bit streaky to begin with. This took me 3 layers to get an even coverage. But it is important to use an off-white color like Ulthuan Grey so that we can then subsequently highlight it later on. You also want to be very careful here not to hit any of the black armor that we have essentially completed. Next up, we're going to start painting in the reds, and this will be for the weapon casing, the wax on the purity seals, and the lenses on the helmet. And for this we'll be using the best of reds, which is of course Khorne Red. Again, just be very careful when you're using this here, especially when it gets to those eye lenses, and if you need to use a slightly smaller brush. Okay, the mini's really starting to come together now, and honestly there's not a huge amount left to colour in. One of the last areas to base coat is the metallics, and for the majority of them we'll be using some Leadbelcher. Okay, here you can see all the areas that we have picked out using our silver colour on the Marine and also on its backpack. The other metallic we'll be using here is one of my favourites. It is Runelord Brass, and we can use this for all of the decorative areas that we haven't touched with the silver, along with the bullet casings that you can see in the magazine. And here's how he looks. I did miss the skull on the shoulder pad here, but I'll address that off camera, don't worry. Next up, we'll use some Zandri Dust to pick out all of the areas that are going to be parchment, and if your guys have tabards, then this would work for that area as well. Alright, next we're going to tackle the straps and the undersuit. For me, I like to keep this very subtle, so we're just going to start off with a base coat of Eshin Grey, and you can usually find the places to paint this showing around the ribs, the joints at the hips, the back of the knees, the armpits, the elbows, you know, all those really easy to reach areas. Alright, another area we can pick out now is leather. On my model, it's just the belt, but you may have holsters or pouches, and we're going to start using Rhinox Hide for this. We're then going to actually go in with some Doombull Brown, and we're going to use this to give our leather more of a weathered look instead of just a pure edge highlight. You still follow the edge, but you use more of a tippy-tappy motion with the brush to create more of a random pattern. If you wanted to, you could also do this with a sponge, as long as you were careful not to kind of dab onto the, again, armor that we've already completed. Alright, and here's how that looks. Don't worry too much if it looks a little rough for now. That's part of the intention, really. So we're going to take some Light Ochre and do the same thing, but over a smaller area, focusing more on the edges where the leather would be kind of more worn or more distressed. With that Light Ochre applied, you might be concerned that things look a little bit too bright, but don't worry, we will address that shortly. Before we continue with the shading though, I do want to address the transfers. This is something that comes up again and again, so I thought I'd go through the process here. Firstly, we'll use some Decal Fix from Vallejo This is used to clean the surfaces for the transfer and also acts as a varnish to provide better adhesion. So we will cover the white area of the shoulder pads with this. Next step, once that's done, is to get your transfers, and in my case I have these really old ones. So I've taken some water, and you want to soak your transfer for roughly 20 seconds. I used Alexa to time this, but other timing methods are available. And then using a wet brush, begin to kind of agitate the transfer until it starts to move. Then slide your brush across the transfer in the direction you want to place it. Now, as you see here, I broke this, but I kept the footage in as an example that all is not lost, even when things go a little bit wrong. Now, just to clarify, the reason it broke is because where I was holding the transfer with my tweezers, I was pinching the part of the clear area of the transfer, which on these older ones can be quite large. And here's a copy of the transfer sheet just so you can see what I mean. So I continued to place the larger part of the transfer where I wanted it, and then adjusted the broken bit to slide it on and got it as close as where it should be. So take your cotton buds, and we're going to dip this into some decal softener. This helps to essentially dissolve the transfer till only the colored parts remain, which helps it to adapt to a rounded surface like a pauldron a lot better. So I'm going to use this cotton bud to gently push down any of the raised areas of the transfer, and then I'm also going to gently nudge that broken piece towards where it should be. Alright, now it's dried. You can see that the transfer is on there, but it now looks a little bit shiny. So I'm just going to apply some matte varnish here. This one's from Vallejo, over the shoulder pad, and hopefully that will take off some of that sheen. Alright, as you can see, that matte varnish has taken away some of the glossiness to those transfers, and they definitely now look like they are part of the shoulder pad. Let's start shading in some of the model now. We'll start with some Nuln Oil, which we're going to use in two different ways. One, we're going to use it to cover all of our silver metallics, our reds, and also the undersuit, dulling this down slightly or helping to add definition. We're also going to use this to panel line in all of our model, painting it in between all of the panels and where we want to suggest shadow. The next shade we will use is Agrax Earthshade, and this is for our belt and any leather areas. You're looking to cover this all over the leather areas, and this is going to help to unify the colors a little bit better, but it's also going to dull down the brightness of that Light Ochre slightly. Whilst this belt is drying, we can use some Seraphim Sepia to shade in our parchment areas, our brass, and also the lower edge of the shoulder pads. Okay, we're next going to add in a line of white scar on the upper areas of the shoulder pads. This is essentially an edge highlight, but it's on the inside of the trim. Next, taking some Mephiton Red, we will begin some of the work on the red areas, looking to essentially leave the Khorne Red in the areas that should be darker, and using this to really brighten up the rest of the areas. We can pick out the raised areas of the wax seals. We're looking to use this to paint a line into the lenses, leaving a line of Khorne Red showing around the outside edge, and also pick out the weapons. Then with all of those areas blocked in, we can take some Evil Sunz Scarlett and begin to edge highlight the weapons and add another thinner line into those lenses. Then we're going to mix in some Tau Light Ochre with the Evil Sunz Scarlett and pick out some of the areas we want to add interest to and put a dot into the corner of the eyes. Alright, let's finish off those parchment areas now using a 50-50 mix of Zandri Dust and Bone White from Vallejo. What you're looking to do here is focus this on the edges, and then on the main part of the parchment, drag your brush sort of back and forth to create a bit of a random pattern over the surface. Alright, next we're going to take some Wildwood Contrast and we're going to use this to essentially paint in some script on our parchment. We're looking to do this by painting some dots and dashes, which will mimic small print script. I also switched over to Black Templar contrast to add some variety between these. Alright, there's only a couple of small things left to do now, so we're going to go back in with our Runelord Brass and pick out the edges of the wings, some of the bullet casing area, and also the tops of the skulls. And then using some Stormhost Silver, we can highlight those other metallic areas, picking out the edges of the weapons and all of those little studs. And there you have it though, a very clean looking Black Templar Intercessor without too much difficulty. Make sure to base your model to fit the rest of your army. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. And do drop us a comment below if you have found something useful. I do have more of these planned for the founding chapters, as well as a few others, so do let me know which you'd like to see next in the comments below. Take it easy, and I'll catch you on the next one.